We are back with another episode of Gatehouse Insights. This morning, I'm joined by Jennifer Lau, who is going to shed some light on practicing law in regional Victoria, leadership, and why it is important for lawyers to be pursuing interests outside of law. Make sure you subscribe to the Gatehouse Legal Recruitment YouTube channel to catch it all. Thanks for joining me today, Jennifer. I wanted to begin with what made you pursue a career in legal?
Yeah, sure. So it was, always this idea of advocacy, and it started off at a really young age. So a bit of personal background. I was born to migrant parents that escaped Timor during the Indonesian invasion. I was fortunate to be born and raised in Melbourne, but I grew up in commission housing. So I guess from a very early age, I was exposed to, what was a lot of limitation. I became an advocate for my own parents as well, that there was a lack of English skills, became a natural, interpreter for legal government documents, calling the bank on their behalf. So it became instilled at me at a very early age, this idea of advocating for people that weren't able to advocate for their own due to their personal limitations. And before uni, that's where the thought occurred to me. Being a lawyer was a profession where we had the privilege to utilise our set of skills and qualifications to actually help people. So it just came naturally to pursue a career in plaintiff law.
Yeah. Now, you're also, and you mentioned in the notes you sent through to me, but a high school dropout at year 11. Tell me a bit about that, and because we don't hear too many lawyers that have dropped out of high school and then go on and do a law degree. Tell me a little bit more about that. What made you drop out, and then how did you get back in and then become a lawyer?
Yeah, so it was definitely quite a long pathway, Louise. So I was going through quite a difficult time. As a 15-year-old in high school, I unfortunately mixed with the wrong crowd and didn't really fit in. And there was also a lot of, tension between myself and my family, just from the cultural and generational gap and differences. So I did give up on high school when I was about 15 in year 11, mixed with the wrong crowd. And it came to a point where I was let down by those particular so-called friends at that time, and I had a bit of a turning point then due to some personal injustices where I thought to myself, I really do need to probably look at getting back into education, at least finishing year 12. And that's when getting into law was really something I wanted to pursue. But unfortunately, as a year 11 dropout, that wasn't viable. So I did return to high school, and I was told that given I missed quite a bit of my VCE, I was able to join my previous cohort but undertake VCAL. So I finished VCAL, and with VCAL, given that you're only doing 2 VCE units, you don't really graduate with a very high enter. So it became quite a long journey, and on reflection, it was about a 7-year journey actually, but it was at that point where I said to myself, I need, and I guess this is the Taurus in me and the stubbornness, and I thought to myself, I want to complete a law degree with Monash University, and it seems so far-fetched as a VCAL graduate really. So the first step was trying to actually get my foot into any university as a stepping stone, but without the ATA score, I couldn't even do that. So I spent 2 years at TAFE undertaking business courses and just really set my eye on the goal of still pursuing a degree. And I did well enough to enter a arts and commerce degree with Deakin. But once again, it wasn't my preference as I was still pursuing a law degree. So halfway through, I worked on my marks, and it was towards the end of the double degree that my marks were looking pretty good. So it just made sense to finish those double degrees and then apply for what was, the ultimate goal of completing a law degree. I was fortunate enough when I buckled down and studied hard to finish my double degree with a distinction average, which saw it entry into the Monash JD program. Looking back, yeah, it was definitely a longer journey that required, rather than going immediately from high school with the VCE enter score to then pursue Monash law. But now on reflection, given the troubles I had as a 15, 16-year-old, I don't think I would have been mature enough to undertake legal studies at about 18. So I guess the exposure and life experiences and undertaking another 2 degrees prior really allowed me to mature as a person before I went on to do law. So it's definitely not the traditional pathway in terms of getting to where I am, but I felt like it's been a lot more satisfying having to work towards that goal and I guess just really pushing through.
I love how you navigated through the system and to get to your end result, or to your end goal, because a lot of people think that we need to do, obviously, VCE. I'm not saying anyone should, drop out, but they think need to do VCE, get high marks, get into Melbourne law or, Monash, then apply for a top tier. But you did it differently, and it just, I suppose, shows that if you really, really want something, you'll find a way to get through it. So that's pretty awesome.
That's right. And I really do think the barriers that appear there are self-created. It really is. So I could have easily said to myself, it's just all a bit too hard. There's no way that I'll be able to enter, a law degree, but it's about breaking down those barriers step by step. And yes, it was a long process, but it just, you do end up enjoying the journey as much as the result.
Yeah. Now, you're practicing in regional Victoria, and we're in Melbourne, so I'm going to say lucky for you, because we're still in super hard restrictions. But I wanted to get your thoughts and your views on what made you make that transition from, I suppose, Melbourne CBD to regional Vic.
Yeah, sure. So to be frank with you, like any young lawyer, I really wanted the city lifestyle, to be working at maybe, the Rialto Towers, a fancy office overlooking South Bank. I was lucky to start my career at the Slater and Gordon office in Dandenong, which is about 10 minutes from where my parents are based now. I started there as a legal assistant, and in about 2016, when I finished up my JD, I was offered a graduate role. I was there for about a couple of years, and in my it would have been towards the end of my first year of practice, so about 2017, sorry, I apologise, about 2018, just reflecting, I had Megan, who was the then Workers' Compensation General Manager, who I remain quite close to today, tap me on the shoulder and say, Jen, you're doing well here, you've got your own practice as a first-year lawyer, but are you actually up for a challenge? And I thought to myself, okay, why is she asking me this? She says, look, there's been a senior lawyer that's actually left our Bendigo office. It's a great opportunity to undertake what is a highly litigated common law practice. And that would have obviously required me to relocate. At that point in time, I had a very certain lifestyle. I was living about 5 minutes away from Chapel Street, so a very high density area, and I guess in a sense living the dream as a late 20-year-old. But when Meg put that proposition to me, funny enough, I didn't ponder too much. I actually said, look, why not? The worst thing that could happen is I don't enjoy it. I do a year and I come back to one of the other Slater and Gordon offices. So that was about June 2018. It's now October 2020, and I actually don't see myself going back to Melbourne at this point in time.
Yeah, that's awesome. There's a lot of misconceptions around when we touch in with the junior lawyers and even graduates. They've got this belief that, moving to suburban law firms, they're not going to get the work, let alone going to a regional firm, they're not going to get the work, the training, and things like that. What's your experience with that?
I actually beg to differ. I once again had misconceptions myself, but having done about 2.5 years here now, I do feel there is a lot more opportunity. So I walked into a very senior practice. So as a second-year lawyer, I was actually given the opportunity to run a very mature common law practice. I was exposed to many reputable QCs, started building a lot of relationships with them directly. I was dealing with complex liability cases as well with multiple defendants. And upon reflection, if I stayed at one of the suburban offices or considered maybe a career in the Melbourne-based office, where the reality is that there's about half a dozen other lawyers that are associates or senior associates, and you as the junior lawyer are unfortunately at the bottom of the pecking order. So moving to a regional office, I was able to really get deep into the technicalities of files. And I do feel like that actually fast-tracked my career. So going in mid-2018, the following year, just before the anniversary of my second year post-admission, I was actually promoted to associateship, which was a great surprise. So in terms of opportunities, in the actual practice, I was given more. I didn't actually feel that there was a lack of training or mentorship to help me with that. And I guess that's credit to working at quite a large firm with about 16 offices in Victoria. Although there wasn't that physical presence, my previous supervising partner at Dandenong was always a call away. We would have weekly catch-ups. We would workshop files as well. And I also had a direct relationship with the general manager that approached me for the role. So she would also mentor me and workshop files with me. So I did actually feel really supported. And although it wasn't that physical presence, because we were scheduling times on a set date on a weekly basis, I actually felt like I was receiving more support. So it has worked well. And it comes back to, did I feel that I would receive less opportunities? Probably. But once I started, I was actually surprised about the amount of opportunities, not just as a lawyer, and I can elaborate further in a moment, but just the other opportunities available in working in a regional town as well.
But how can lawyers bring leadership into their roles, no matter what level they're at?
I think that's so important, Louise, and that became, that concept was instilled at me when I was actually just I started off as a legal assistant with Slater's. One of the core values that really resonated with me was take the lead. And to me, that interprets as you don't necessarily need to be titled a leader in order to lead. To me, taking the lead is taking accountability, owning the situation, and also being in a position where you can actually empower and influence others as well for them to, I guess, take their actions in the same way. I think it's so important for lawyers to have that, because I feel like in the old school view has been really, you're a great lawyer if you've got great technical skills, you're analytical, but really we're working, I'm sure, not just personal injury, but most lawyers are working in some sort of level of clients management, and that comes with being emotionally aware and intelligent, and being a bit of a visionary, forward thinking, and that type of approach of leadership, regardless of where you are, if you are considered a leader, is, I think, integral to being a lawyer, because it really flows through to your support staff, so your legal assistants and secretaries, which I feel like has really boosted morale in the office, as well as your clients. If you're able to demonstrate that you are just taking accountability and owning any particular situation that pops up, your clients do feed off that as well, and I think it empowers them.
I'm not sure if you've read, there's a really good book called The Leader with No Title. Have you read that?
No, I'm going to add that to the list.
It's really, really good, and it touches on all the concepts you've just spoken about. So, and it basically says anyone really can be a leader. So have a read of it. I really like it. So it's a good book.
Thanks for that tip.
No worries. Now you have other interests. So Jennifer, you have so many other interests outside of law. I was hoping you could touch on these for us.
Yeah, so a couple of them. One I would say is still somewhat law related. So I am a casual law academic at the local university as well. So I deliver seminars on business law to business students. Apart from that, I do a bit of voluntary work on the side. So this is where I've found working in the region has really benefited me on a professional and personal level. So I was lucky to secure 2 voluntary board roles with 2 non-for-profits, one being Interchange, which is a local NDIS provider, and the second one being the London Capacity Multicultural Services Organisation. So essentially, their work is looking at empowering migrant and refugee individuals and families that settle within the Bendigo region. Given my personal background, I hold that quite close to heart. And just recently, early in the year, I was actually quite honoured to be nominated by the board to actually lead and chair them as chairperson. So that's something I do in my spare time in terms of just giving back to the local community with these 2 roles that are very similar in terms of my values. Apart from that, something that's a little bit different is I'm also a qualified fitness instructor. So pre-COVID, so although we're in stage 3, Louise, unfortunately our gyms are still closed as well. So before COVID, I was running group fitness classes at my local gym. So that's been put on hold at the moment, but outside of law, that's really, that's been my outlet actually, although it is in one sense work, in the fitness instructing, I've actually quite enjoyed it, and it's given me, I guess, a bit of a balance between being in the office and then being able to jump around with the girls and have a good time in a HIIT class.
Now, a lot of people would probably ask, how do you find the time for all that? For, gym, instructor, board positions, lecturing or tutoring, how do you find the time for all that?
I actually read a really good article by Harvard Business Review recently, and it was the concept of managing your energy versus managing your time. So in terms of the legal work, that's always going to be the bulk of where my energy and time goes. So it's just working out some sort of system that just works well with you. So for me, those difficult letters of advice or court documents that I tend to procrastinate over, I always make sure they're at 8 o'clock in my diary. So getting through that and allocating I guess when I have the most energy and getting through the hard bits. In terms of the other roles, I guess I'm lucky with Slaters. They're really supportive about embracing what they call our other talents outside of being a lawyer. So it's really instilled a lot of confidence in me to pursue these extra interests, really. It's definitely planning ahead, Louise. So every Sunday night, I'll have a cup of tea and I'll just plan my week ahead. It's also setting expectations, because at times with competing responsibilities, you can't do everything at once. So there will be times where I do need to taper down on fitness instructing when it comes to exam time for the Trobe students, for example. It's about communicating that and setting expectations as well. So if my legal work is getting quite large, I will speak to my practice group leader. This is how I'm feeling. I think I just need to plan this out a bit better, and then we would have a meeting to workshop things. So it's about communicating it when I do sense that the commitments are probably becoming a bit large, and just making the time for each responsibility by planning ahead, really. I guess what's helped is I'm actually on a compressed 4-day work week. So instead of doing the 5 days, my employers allowed me to do the 38 hours from Monday to Thursday. So I find that that's given me Fridays to undertake miscellaneous activities such as this interview today, as well as a lot of my non-for-profit work. So usually Fridays is when I will catch up on my board work.
Yeah, I want to also touch on you get yourself out there a lot in the market. For, I suppose, junior lawyers, how important is it for them to market themselves and get out there and promote themselves?
That's a really good question, and I think it's a bit of a balancing act. When I was an eager law student, I did attempt to attend every networking session, and I'm not sure if I come across introverted, but I would say I'm a self-confessed introvert. So I do think it's important that obviously the networking side of things is very genuine, and it comes naturally. So why I say it needs to be a balance is, yes, it is important to establish those relationships, but it's also, I think personally, what's worked better for me is focusing on myself and what I can give back to the community and my input. And I felt like that energy has then gravitated back towards me. And those connections and relationships were, I guess, organically built rather than going out to seek too much. So I find that focusing on what value you can bring rather than always going out to network is what's personally worked for me. To answer your question short, it is definitely important. But I guess like I mentioned, it's about knowing. Sorry, it's about figuring out, working on yourself and what you can offer, and then those friendships, professional networks and connections, they seem to build over time. And I do think that younger lawyers and law students need to take the pressure off trying too hard to network, and just take a step back and focus on them, and those friendships and the relationships will establish in time.
Yeah. And before we wrap up, I suppose a lot has changed in the legal profession over the last 6 months. There's firms that have never said we'll never work remote, and now in 24 hours they've managed to set themselves up with working remote. Where do you think, I suppose, the future of law is heading? Do you think remote work will stay? Flexible work. Yeah, what's your views on future of the legal profession?
I guess the future, and I can only really comment on the personal injury space. So no doubt everything's become digital, and it was a bit of a transition, I'm sure, for every business as well. But there's been a lot of positives. I've conducted a couple of serious injury hearings via Zoom, and being able to actually have my clients set up in the Bendigo office to provide evidence has been really beneficial in a sense that they feel it's a less confrontational setting. They feel more at ease. So there has been benefits in going virtual in legal practice from that perspective. I think some components like that I would welcome to stay, but there are other components that are quite challenging, especially in plaintiff law, where it is so important to meet your clients and build that connection with them. And they're going through a really tough time. And sometimes phone or Zoom conversations with them is just not the same. It does help in a sense that we do service clients that can be up to 2 hours north of Bendigo, up in Echuca. So from the perspective of the travel and the impact of injuries not allowing them to drive long distances, that's really broken down those barriers. I think that the way we're set up currently, being all virtual, is not sustainable long term, just from the client management perspective. But I think I'd like to see when we do eventually get out of this and to some sort of new normal, because it won't be the old normal, that it's a bit of a mix of two in terms of the flexible working arrangements. So we've all demonstrated we can actually work from home and we can practice law from home, but it no doubt takes away that human and social interaction, which I think is integral. What's also been beneficial is going paperless. So there's definitely a lot less clutter these days. I know the barristers, some of the QCs are struggling with that concept, going paperless. So that's definitely something that I would like to see stay. But and also potentially the virtual court hearings, as well as, like I mentioned, from the client perspective, it's just been a lot. It's put a lot of clients at ease, just being in a less formal setting for them to provide evidence when we need to.
Jennifer, this has been amazing. So thanks for joining me this morning.
It's a pleasure, Louise. Thanks so much for having me.
There you have it. That is the end of this episode of Gatehouse Insights. Thank you for watching, and thank you for sharing this video with your friends. If you haven't already done so, make sure you subscribe to the Gatehouse Legal Recruitment YouTube channel and you can see more.